Hey guys, just a quick thank you to all of you amazing legends that are subscribed. I could not have done it without you. But most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button and like this video. It's free and it really helps our small team out. Thank you. I never thought I'd be one of those people with a creepy online dating story, but here I am. It all started when I matched with Chris on Tinder. At first, everything seemed normal, even great. We had so much in common, chatting about our favorite movies, dream travel destinations, and music we loved. After a few days of texting back and forth, he asked if I wanted to meet up for coffee. I figured why not? He seemed nice enough. We met at a cute little cafe downtown. Chris looked just like his photos. Average height, brown hair, friendly smile. Nothing to set off any alarm bells. As we settled in with our drinks, the conversation flowed easily. He was charming and attentive, asking lots of questions about my life and interests. But as we kept talking, I started to get an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. Chris seemed to know things about me that I hadn't shared yet. He casually mentioned the company where I worked, even though I was sure I hadn't told him. Then he brought up the small town where I grew up, which definitely wasn't in my Tinder profile. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe I'd mentioned these things and just forgot. But then Chris said something that made my blood run cold. He commented that he'd seen me walking my dog yesterday afternoon. The thing is, I don't have a dog. I've never had a dog. I made an excuse about needing to get back to work and quickly left the cafe. As I walked away, I pulled out my phone to block Chris' number. That's when I saw I had a new Instagram notification. I posted a photo earlier that day of me at the park. Suddenly, I remembered Chris mentioning seeing that exact photo, except I'd actually taken it 2 days ago and only just posted it. I hadn't even told Chris my Instagram handle. My hands shaking, I blocked Chris on every platform I could think of. But over the next few days, he kept popping up. I'd see him across the street when I left work. He'd be sitting a few tables away at my favorite restaurant. Once I even spotted him at the grocery store, pretending to examine produce while watching me. The messages started coming from new numbers and accounts, always with creepy details only someone following me would know. What outfit I wore that day, where I'd gotten coffee that morning, who I had lunch with. I changed my routines, varied my schedule, but he always seemed to find me. I stopped feeling safe anywhere. Even in my own apartment, I'd catch glimpses of someone watching from the building across the street. Was it just my paranoia at this point? Or was he really there? I went to the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do without clear threats or evidence. I showed them the messages, but Chris was careful to never explicitly threaten me. They suggested I change my number and social media accounts, maybe even move. But why should I have to uproot my whole life? My friends tried to be supportive, but I could tell they thought I was overreacting. They'd say things like, maybe it's just a coincidence, or I'm sure he'll get bored and move on soon. But they hadn't seen the cold, possessive look in his eyes. They didn't understand how violated I felt. I started seeing a therapist to deal with the anxiety and paranoia. She helped me come up with safety plans and coping strategies. But even in her office, I found myself constantly glancing out the window, half expecting to see Chris' face peering in. It's been months now, and the constant fear has taken its toll. I've lost weight. I can't sleep, and I flinch at every notification on my phone. I've become a shell of my former self. The carefree, outgoing person I used to be feels like a distant memory. I've thought about moving to a new city, starting fresh where Chris can't find me, but part of me worries he'd just follow me there too. And why should I have to leave my job, my friends, my whole life behind? It doesn't seem fair. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever feel truly safe again. Will I always be looking over my shoulder, waiting for Chris to appear? The experience has made me wary of meeting anyone new online or in person. How can I trust that they are who they say they are? I wish I could go back and undo that one simple swipe on Tinder. Who knew that such a small action could lead to this ongoing nightmare? I try to tell myself that it's not my fault that I couldn't have known, but in my darkest moments, I still blame myself for not seeing the red flags sooner. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm focusing on rebuilding my sense of security and reclaiming my life. I've joined a self-defense class and started volunteering in a women's shelter. Helping other people who've been through similar experiences gives me a sense of purpose. I don't know what the future holds or if Chris will ever truly leave me alone, but I'm determined not to let this experience define me forever. I'm more than just a victim of online stalking. I'm strong, I'm resilient, and I refuse to live in fear forever. Someday, I hope to look back on this as just a chapter in my life, not the whole story. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, is to trust my instincts. That uneasy feeling I had during that first coffee date, I should have listened to it. Now I'm going to pay attention to those low warning signs, those gut feelings that something isn't quite right. I also learned the importance of online privacy. I'm much more careful now about what I share on social media and who I connect with online. It's sad that we have to be so guarded, but that's the reality of the digital age we live in. To anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, please know that you're not alone. There are resources and people who can help. Don't be afraid to reach out, to tell your story. The more we talk about these experiences, the more awareness we can raise. As for me, I'm taking it day by day. Some days are harder than others, but I'm slowly reclaiming my life. And who knows? Maybe someday I'll even be brave enough to try online dating again. But next time, you can bet I'll be a lot more cautious about who I swipe right on. It started stupid enough. We matched and began chatting. And from the start, John seemed perfect. He had a great job as a software engineer, shared my love of indie films, and always knew how to make me laugh. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, and I found myself eagerly checking my phone for his messages throughout the day. After a few weeks of talking, we decided to meet up for dinner at a local sushi place. I was nervous but excited as I got ready that evening, taking extra care with my makeup and outfit. When I arrived at the restaurant, I spotted John waiting in a corner booth. My first impression was positive. He was tall and handsome, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and dark jeans. As I approached the table, John stood up to greet me. That's when I noticed something off about his eyes. They were fixed on me with an unsettling intensity, almost predatory. I tried to shake off the feeling, chalking up to first date jitters. We sat down and started with some small talk about our days. But as the conversation continued, my unease grew. John kept leaning in uncomfortably close, invading my personal space. His questions became increasingly probing and personal, asking about my family, where I lived, my daily routines. I deflected as best I could, trying to steer us back to lighter topics. At one point, John made an odd comment about how I looked just like someone he used to know. The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. His tone was wistful, but there was an undercurrent of something darker. I forced a laugh and changed the subject, but alarm bells were going off in my head. I excused myself to use the restroom, needing a moment to collect my thoughts. As I was washing my hands, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from John, saying he just wanted to get to know me better and not to be scared. My stomach dropped. How did he know I was feeling uneasy? Was he watching me somehow? With shaking hands, I splashed some cold water on my face and took a few deep breaths. I decided to go back out there, make an excuse, and leave as quickly as possible. But when I returned to our table, John was gone. There was no sign of him. No jacket draped over the chair, no half-finished drinks. Even the sushi we'd ordered hadn't arrived yet. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. I stood there frozen, unsure what to do. Part of me was relieved he was gone, but mostly I felt confused and rattled. I asked our waiter if he'd seen where my date went, but he just shrugged apologetically. I canceled our order and practically ran out of the restaurant, looking over my shoulder the whole way to my car. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the evening in my mind, second-guessing every interaction. Had I imagined the whole thing? Was I being paranoid? But no, John's strange behavior and sudden disappearance were very real. The next morning, I went to block John on Tinder, only to discover our entire chat history was gone. His profile had vanished too. Now thoroughly freaked out, I Googled his name and the company he claimed to work for. Nothing came up. It was like John had never existed. For days afterwards, I felt on edge. I double-checked the locks on my doors and windows each night. I varied my routine, taking different routes to work and the gym. I even stayed with a friend for a few nights, too scared to be alone in my apartment. Gradually, as nothing more happened, I started to relax. Maybe John was just a weirdo who got cold feet and bailed on our date. Maybe he was a catfish using a fake identity who panicked when we met in person. Whatever the case, it seemed he was out of my life for good. Or so I thought. 2 weeks after our date, I was walking home from the grocery store when I got that feeling of being watched. I glanced around but didn't see anyone suspicious. Still, my skin was crawling. I picked up my pace, clutching my pepper spray. As I turned onto my street, I caught a glimpse of someone ducking behind a parked car. My heart racing, I sprinted the last block home and slammed the door behind me. Through the peephole, I saw a tall figure in a baseball cap lingering across the street, partially hidden behind a tree. Even from that distance, I recognized the intense stare. It was John. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was long gone. They took my statement, but said there wasn't much they could do without evidence of an actual crime. I filed a report anyway, hoping to create a paper trail in case things escalated. That was a month ago, and I hadn't seen John since, but I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there watching and waiting. I've deleted all my dating apps and beefed up my home security. My friends think I'm overreacting, that it was just one creepy guy who was moved on, but they didn't see the look in his eyes that night. I don't know what John's true intentions were. Maybe he really did just want to get to know me better and I misread the situation. But my gut tells me I narrowly avoided something much worse. These days, I'm a lot more cautious about who I trust and how much I share online, because you never know who's really on the other side of that screen, or what they might be capable of. It all started when I matched with this girl named Kim. She seemed pretty cool, and we hit it off right away. We chatted for a while on the app, and she had this quirky vibe that I really liked. After a few days of messaging, we decided to hop on a phone call. It went great, so we set up another one. Both calls were fun, and I felt that we had a good connection. After the second call, we agreed to meet up in person. We chose a quiet diner for breakfast, figuring it would be a low-key spot for a first date. I was excited, but a little nervous as I drove there. When I arrived, I spotted Kim sitting in a booth near the back. As I got closer, I noticed someone else was with her, a guy about our age, sitting across from her. I hesitated for a second, wondering if I'd misunderstood our plans, but Kim waved me over with a smile, so I headed to the table. She introduced the guy as her friend, which caught me off guard. I hadn't expected anyone else to be there, but I tried to roll with it. Maybe he was just stopping by to say hi. As we settled in and started talking, I noticed something odd about Kim's friend. He barely said a word, just sat there silently. But the weird part was how he kept staring at me. He never took his eyes off me. Every time I laughed or made a joke, he'd shift in his seat and adjust his glasses, like he was analyzing my every move. It was super uncomfortable, but I tried to ignore it and focus on Kim. We ordered our food and kept chatting. Kim was just as fun in person as she'd been on the phone, but I couldn't fully relax with her friend's eyes boring into me. After a while, I excused myself to use the bathroom, hoping for a moment to collect myself. When I came back to the table, Kim's friend was gone. I asked where he went, and she said he'd stepped out for a bit. But his jacket was still hanging on the back of his chair, and I noticed the bill had already been paid. Something about the situation felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. We finished up our meal, and I was relieved to be done with the awkward encounter. As I was getting ready to leave, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Kim, saying I looked cute and she hoped we could hang out again soon. The message itself was nice, but what freaked me out was the timestamp. It was from before we even finished eating. Before I could process that, another text came through. This one said, "Your friend seems nice. Too bad he had to leave early." I froze. I hadn't seen the guy leave. I was pretty sure he never did. The whole thing suddenly felt very wrong. I mumbled some excuse to Kim about needing to go and got out of there as fast as I could. Once I was in my car, I blocked her number and unmatched on Tinder, but I couldn't shake the creepy feeling that followed me home. For days after, I kept replaying the breakfast in my mind. Why was that guy there? What was he doing? And how did Kim send those texts while we were still at the table? I found myself looking over my shoulder more often, half expecting to see that guy's face in a crowd. The whole experience left me feeling uneasy about dating apps. You think you're getting to know someone, but you never really know who's on the other side of the screen, or who they might bring along to a date. I took a break from Tinder after that. It wasn't worth the risk of another weird encounter like that one. Plus, I kept imagining that guy's stare every time I thought about swiping right on someone new. Looking back, there were probably some red flags I missed with Kim. Maybe I should have been more cautious when she brought a friend to our first meeting. Or maybe I should have trusted my gut when things started feeling off. But hindsight is 20/20, it's right. I've started dating again, but I'm definitely more careful now. I always meet in public places, and I make sure a friend knows where I'm going. And if anyone ever brings an uninvited guest to a first date again, I'm out of there. The whole thing taught me a valuable lesson about trusting my instincts, If something feels wrong, it probably is. It's better to seem a little rude by leaving early than to ignore those warning signs and end up in a potentially dangerous situation. I still wonder sometimes about Kim and her friend. Who were they really? What was their deal? But I know I'm better off not knowing. Some mysteries are best left unsolved, especially when it comes to creepy Tinder encounters. Lily's profile seemed normal enough: cute photos, a witty bio about loving adventures and coffee. We matched and started chatting. The conversation flowed easily and she seemed fun, so after a few days I suggested meeting up. We agreed to grab coffee at this cozy little cafe downtown. I arrived a few minutes early and grabbed us a table by the window. When Lily walked in, I immediately noticed she looked a bit different from her photos. Nothing major, just slightly older and more intense looking. But I brushed it off, figuring everyone tries to use their most flattering pics online. As soon as she sat down, Lily launched into conversation, barely pausing to take a breath. She asked me all sorts of questions about my childhood, my family, my job. At first, I thought she was just trying to get to know me, but the interrogation felt a bit much for a first date. Still, I answered politely, not wanting to seem rude. About halfway through our coffee, I started to get an uneasy feeling in my stomach. Lily's eyes had a wild look to them, and she kept leaning in way too close across the table. When I mentioned I had plans with friends later, her demeanor completely changed. She got quiet and sullen, stirring her coffee aggressively. I tried to lighten the mood with some jokes, but Lily barely cracked a smile. As we were finishing up, she grilled me about exactly where I was going after and who I'd be with. I lied and said I was just heading home to relax. That seemed to placate her a bit. We said an awkward goodbye outside the cafe. I breathed a sigh of relief as I walked away, glad the strange date was over. Little did I know things were about to get so much worse. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. It was Lily, saying she had a great time and wanted to hang out again right away. I ignored it, figuring she was just being overeager. But the messages kept coming. Over the next few hours, she called me over a dozen times. Each voicemail got progressively more unhinged. In the last one, Lily's voice was low and threatening. She said she knew where I lived and that I'd be seeing her again soon. A chill ran down my spine. How could she possibly know my address? I immediately blocked her number and reported her Tinder profile. But blocking her didn't stop the constant calls from unknown numbers. For weeks, my phone would ring at all hours of the day and night. Sometimes there would be heavy breathing on the other end, other times just silence. I changed my number, but somehow she kept finding ways to contact me. Then one night, I came home to find a bouquet of dead flowers on my doorstep with a card that simply said, "Soon." That was the last straw. I filed a police report, but they said there wasn't much they could do without more evidence. So I packed up and moved across town, not telling anyone my new address. For a while, things were quiet. I started to relax and think maybe the nightmare was over. But then one day at work, I got a new friend request on Facebook. The profile picture was blurry, but I recognized those intense eyes anywhere. It was Lily. My stomach dropped as I saw she'd been friending my coworkers and family members. I deactivated all my social media accounts and warned my loved ones not to accept requests from strangers. But I still felt on edge constantly, always looking over my shoulder and jumping at every sound. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was out there watching me. The stress started to affect my daily life. I had trouble sleeping, often waking up in a cold sweat from nightmares about Lily breaking into my apartment. My work performance suffered as I struggled to concentrate, always wondering if she might show up at my office. I became paranoid about every new person I met, questioning their motives and if they might be connected to Lily somehow. I tried to keep up a brave face around my friends and family, but they could tell something was wrong. I was hesitant to share the full story, worried they might think I was overreacting or that somehow brought this on myself. But eventually, I opened up to my best friend about what was happening. His support meant everything to me during this time. As the weeks turned into months, the harassment seemed to lessen. The phone calls became less frequent, and I stopped finding creepy gifts left for me. But I still couldn't fully relax. Every time I thought it was over, something would happen to remind me that Lily was still out there. One day, I ran into a mutual friend who had been at the cafe the day of my date with Lily. He mentioned seeing us there and asked how things were going. When I told him about Lily's behavior, he looked confused. He said the woman he saw me with looked nothing like the description I gave of Lily. This revelation set my mind spinning. Had Lily somehow used fake photos on her profile, Or was there something even more sinister going on? I decided to do some digging of my own. I reached out to some of the people Lily had tried to friend on Facebook, asking if they knew her. No one did. It was like she had appeared out of thin air, with no real connections or history. I even hired a private investigator, but they couldn't find any concrete information about her either. The mystery of Lily's true identity only added to my anxiety. I started to question everything about our interactions. Had anything she told me been true? Was she even really named Lily? The not knowing was almost worse than the harassment itself. As time passed, the incidents became less frequent. Months would go by without any sign of Lily, but just might start to feel safe again. Something would happen to remind me she was still out there. A hang-up call from an unknown number. A glimpse of someone who looked like her in a crowded street. A strange comment on an old social media post. It's been over a year now since that fateful Tinder match. The constant fear and paranoia have faded, but I'm not sure I'll ever feel completely safe again. I've sworn off online dating completely. The whole experience has made me question how well we can ever really know someone we meet online. It all started when I matched with Emma, a cute girl who seemed pretty chill. We hit it off right away, chatting about our favorite movies and local spots. After a week of messaging, we decided to meet up at this cozy little restaurant downtown. When I got there, I spotted Emma at a table near the back, but she wasn't alone. There was another woman sitting across from her, which caught me off guard. I hesitated for a second before walking over. Emma introduced her as Kara, her best friend. I hadn't expected a third wheel on our first date, but I tried to roll with it. As we ordered drinks, I'd noticed something odd about Kara. She was quiet, barely saying a word, but her eyes were intense. Every time I glanced her way, she'd be staring at me with this weird expression. It was like she was studying me or something. Emma kept giggling nervously whenever I looked at Kara, which only made things more awkward. I tried to focus on Emma, asking her about her job and hobbies, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Kara was always watching. She'd chip in with a comment here and there, but mostly she just observed. The whole vibe fell off. As the night went on, things got weirder. Emma started acting jumpy, like she was hiding something. Kara's stares got more intense, and I swear I saw them exchange meaningful looks a few times. By the time we ordered dessert, I was ready to bolt. I excused myself to use the bathroom, hoping for a breather. That's when I got a text from Emma that made my stomach drop. She said Kara was into me and that I should be honest with her. I tried to play it off as a joke, asking if she meant a threesome. But Emma's reply was dead serious. She warned me that Kara was possessive and that I needed to be careful. At that point, alarm bells were going off in my head. I didn't know what their deal was, but I wanted no part of it. I rushed back to the table, made up some excuse about feeling sick, and got out of there as fast as I could. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Kara. It was creepy as hell, saying she'd been where I was and that I belonged to her now. I blocked her number immediately, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched for days afterward. Looking back, I should have trusted my gut when things first felt off. That uneasy feeling I got from Kara's stares was a red flag I ignored. And Emma's behavior was just as concerning. Why would she set up a date and then bring her friend along? The whole situation was bizarre from start to finish. For a while after that night, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder. Every time I saw someone who looked like Kara or Emma, my heart would race. I even considered deleting Tinder altogether, worried about who else might be out there. But as time passed, the fear faded. I never heard from Emma or Kara again, which was a relief. Still, that experience changed how I approach online dating. Now I'm much more cautious about meeting strangers. I always tell a friend where I'm going and who I'm meeting, and if something feels off, I don't hesitate to leave. The whole ordeal taught me a lot about trusting my instincts. It's easy to brush off warning signs when you're excited about meeting someone new, but sometimes those gut feelings are there for a reason. I'm just glad I got out of that situation before things escalated further. These days, I can laugh about it with my friends. It's become one of those crazy stories you tell at parties. But in the moment, it was genuinely scary. You never know who's really behind that profile picture or what their intentions might be. I still use dating apps occasionally, but I'm much more selective now. I take more time to get to know someone before meeting up, and I always suggest public places for first dates. It might seem paranoid to some, but after what happened with Emma and Kara, I'd rather be safe than sorry. The world of online dating can be unpredictable. Most of the time, it's just normal people looking for connections. But every now and then, you stumble across someone who reminds you to stay alert. My experience with Emma and Kara was a wake up call, a reminder that not everyone online is who they seem to be. In the end, I'm grateful nothing worse happened. It could easily turn into a much scarier situation. Not when I swipe through Tinder or any other dating app. I do it with a healthy dose of caution. And if I ever get that uneasy feeling again, you can bet I'll be out the door in a heartbeat. It all started when I matched with this guy named Dan. His profile seemed pretty normal, just a regular guy with a decent sense of humor who was into the same music as me. We chatted for a bit, and he came across as kind of nerdy, but in a cute way. After messaging back and forth for a few days, we decided to meet up for coffee at this little cafe downtown. When I got there, Dan was already sitting at a table near the window. He stood up to greet me with this huge grin on his face. At first glance, he looked just like his photos. But then I noticed something odd. He was holding a small bouquet of flowers. Not just any flowers, though. They were the exact same type and color as the ones I had posted on my Instagram the week before. The ones that were sitting in a vase in my living room right now. I tried to brush it off as a coincidence. Maybe he just had good taste in flowers, right? We sat down and started talking. For a while, things seemed pretty normal. We chatted about work, hobbies, that kind of stuff. But as time went on, I started noticing more weird little things. Every time I shifted in my seat or reached for my coffee, Dan would do the exact same thing at the exact same time. It was like he was hyper aware of every tiny movement I made. At first, I thought maybe he was just nervous and accidentally mirroring me, but it kept happening over and over. The conversation started to feel one-sided too. Dan barely talked about himself at all. He just kept asking me questions about my life, my friends, my daily routine. Really specific stuff that felt a bit invasive for a first date. I started to get uncomfortable. I casually mentioned that I had plans to meet up with some friends after our date, hoping he'd take the hint that I needed to wrap things up soon. As soon as the words left my mouth, his whole demeanor changed. That big smile vanished, and he got this intense look in his eyes. He started insisting that we should spend more time together, just the two of us. Maybe go back to his place. I politely declined, saying I really did have plans I couldn't break, but he wouldn't let go. He kept pushing, saying how much he wanted to see me again, how long he'd been waiting for this. His hands were shaking and his voice got all weird and quiet. At that point, alarm bells were going off in my head. I needed to get out of there fast. I tried to stand up, but Dan blocked me from leaving the table. He kept whispering about how I needed to give him another chance. I was starting to panic. Finally, I managed to squeeze past him and bolt for the door. I half ran all the way home, constantly looking over my shoulder. When I got to my apartment, I locked the door and tried to calm down. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Dan. My blood ran cold as I read it. He said he was outside my house and he knew I wanted him to come in. I immediately blocked his number and all his social media accounts. Then I called a friend to come stay with me for the night. I was totally freaked out. Over the next few days, I kept seeing glimpses of someone who looked like Dan everywhere I went. Outside my office at the grocery store, walking past my apartment. But every time I looked again, they'd be gone. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I ended up filing a police report, but they said there wasn't much they could do without more evidence. I deleted my Tinder account and all my other dating apps. For weeks, I was constantly on edge. I changed up my routine, varied the times I left for work, asked friends to check in on me regularly. Gradually, the sightings stopped and things went back to normal. But even now, months later, I still get nervous when I see someone who looks like Dan. That experience taught me to be a lot more cautious about meeting strangers from the internet. I'm way more careful about what I post on social media too. I know most Tinder dates don't turn out like this. Lots of people find great relationships through dating apps, but you never really know who's on the other side of that profile. My story could have ended a lot worse if I hadn't trusted my instincts and gotten out of there when I did. These days, I stick to meeting people the old-fashioned way, through friends or in person. It might not be as convenient, but at least I feel safer. And hey, no more surprise flower bouquets from strangers who somehow know what's in my apartment. I'll take that as a win. At first, my conversation with Eric seemed pretty normal. He was friendly and we had a few things in common. The only red flag was how eager he was to meet up, but I brushed it off. thinking he was just excited. We agreed to meet at a quiet bar for drinks. When I arrived, Eric was already there, waiting at a table. He looked like his photos, which was a relief. As I sat down, he gave me a big smile and immediately launched into small talk. At first, everything seemed fine. We chatted about our jobs, hobbies, and favorite TV shows. Eric was attentive and asked a lot of questions. Maybe too many questions now that I think about it. But as the night went on, I started to feel uneasy. There was something off about Eric that I couldn't quite put my finger on. He kept bringing up the idea that he could help me. At first, I thought he was just being nice, offering general support. But then his comments got more specific and intense. He started talking about how he knew people who could fix things for me. The way he said it made it sound ominous, not helpful. What really freaked me out was when Eric started mentioning details about my life that I hadn't told him. He brought up my past relationships, my current job situation, and even some family issues I was dealing with. I'd never shared any of that information with him, not even our online chats. Eric kept insisting that he could help me with all these problems. He said he had connections that could get me out of my job, which I'd never even complained about to him. He talked about how much happier I'd be if I just let him help me. The whole thing felt invasive and creepy. By this point, I was really uncomfortable and wanted to leave. I tried to politely end the night, making excuses about having an early morning. But Eric wasn't taking the hint. He kept pushing, saying he just wanted to help me and that we were a perfect match. When I finally managed to leave the bar, Eric followed me outside. He stood way too close as I tried to get to my car, still insisting that he could fix everything for me. I was scared and just wanted to get out of there. I practically jumped into my car and drove away, my heart racing. I thought that would be the end of it, but Eric wasn't done. Over the next few days, I got a bunch of messages from him. They were all about how I needed him and couldn't handle things on my own. He kept offering to help me with stuff I'd never even mentioned to him. It was like he thought he knew everything about my life and was obsessed with fixing it. I blocked Eric's number, but somehow he kept finding ways to contact me. He'd use different numbers or social media accounts. The messages continued for weeks. Each one made me feel more and more unsettled. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I missed. Eric's eagerness to meet, his intense focus on my life, and his insistence on helping me were all warning signs. I should have trusted my gut when I first started feeling uncomfortable during our date. Don't be afraid to end a date early if you're uncomfortable. And if someone starts showing obsessive or stalker-like behavior, don't hesitate to report them and seek help if needed. As for Eric, I eventually had to get the police involved to stop his harassment. It was a scary and stressful experience, but I'm glad I took action to protect myself. I hope my story can help others stay safe in the world of online dating. In the end, this whole ordeal taught me a lot about setting boundaries and trusting my intuition. While I haven't given up on online dating completely, I approach it with a lot more caution now. I take more time to get to know someone before meeting in person, and I'm not afraid to cut things off if I get any weird vibes. I also learned the importance of having a safety plan when meeting someone new. Now, I always let a friend know where I'm going and who I'm meeting. I make sure my phone is fully charged, and I have a plan for how to leave if things get uncomfortable. It's easy to think that these kinds of scary situations won't happen to you, but my experience with Eric showed me that anyone can end up in a dangerous situation. I'm just grateful that I got out of it safely and was able to put a stop to his behavior. If there's one thing I want people to take away from my story, it's this: always prioritize your safety and trust your gut. No match or potential relationship is worth putting yourself in danger. And if you ever find yourself in a situation that makes you uncomfortable, don't be afraid to speak up or ask for help. Your safety is more important than being polite or not wanting to make a scene. While my Tinder horror story was scary, I'm sharing it in the hope that it might help someone else avoid a similar situation. Stay safe out there, everyone. Samantha seemed like a dream come true. Smart, funny, and absolutely gorgeous. We hit it off right away, chatting about our interests and hobbies. It felt like we had so much in common, and I was genuinely excited to meet her in person. After a few days of messaging back and forth, we decided to meet up at a bar near her place. I was running a bit late, about 10 minutes or so, and when I walked in, I spotted her immediately. She was sitting at a table staring at her phone. As soon as I approached, she looked up and smiled, but there was something off about it. She mentioned that I was late, and although she didn't sound angry, her tone was cold and matter of fact. I apologized and sat down, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in my stomach. We started talking, and at first everything seemed fine. But as the conversation progressed, I noticed she was asking some pretty personal questions. It wasn't the usual first date small talk. She wanted to know about my salary, my friendships, and how I handled certain emotions. It felt like I was being interrogated rather than getting to know someone. The more I answered her questions, the more I felt like she was judging every word I said. It was as if she was trying to determine if I met some hidden criteria she had in mind. When I mentioned my job as a freelance writer, her reaction was unexpected. She seemed to think I'd be happier with a more stable job, and even suggested she could help me find one. It was presumptuous, to say the least. As the night went on, things got weirder. She started talking about our future together, making plans for trips, and even discussing what our kids might look like. Remember, this was our first date. I hadn't even finished my first drink, and she was already naming our hypothetical children. I tried to steer the conversation to lighter topics, but she always managed to bring it back to deeply personal subjects. She asked about my family history, my medical background, and even my credit score. It felt less like a date and more like a job interview or a medical examination. At one point, she excused herself to use the restroom. While she was gone, I took a moment to breathe and check my phone. That's when I noticed something strange. I had several notifications from apps I rarely use: my banking app, my health insurance app, and even my credit monitoring app. It was as if someone had been trying to access my accounts. When Samantha returned, she seemed different. Her smile was wider, her eyes more intense. She leaned in close and started talking about how perfect we were for each other, how she knew we were meant to be from the moment we matched. She even mentioned specific details about my life that I was sure I hadn't shared with her. I made an excuse about feeling unwell and needing to leave. As I stood up, she grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. She insisted that I come back to her place, as she would take care of me. The look in her eyes was almost desperate. I managed to break free and hurried out of the bar. As I walked to my car, I could feel her eyes on me. I glanced back and saw her standing at the bar's entrance, watching me intently. I got in my car and drove away as fast as I could. Over the next few days, I received countless messages from Samantha. She alternated between professing her love for me and accusing me of ruining her life by leaving. I blocked her number, but she found ways to contact me through social media and even my work email. Things escalated when I started noticing her car parked outside my apartment building. She'd wait there for hours, sometimes all night. I'd catch glimpses of her watching me through my window. It got to the point where I was afraid to leave my own home. I reported her to the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do without concrete evidence of a threat. I felt helpless and scared, constantly looking over my shoulder. The final straw came when I received a package in the mail. Inside was a framed photo of me sleeping in my bed, clearly taken from inside my apartment. That's when I knew I had to take drastic action. I packed up my essentials, quit my job, and moved to a different city. I changed my phone number, deleted all my social media accounts, and started fresh. It's been 6 months since that night at the bar, and I haven't heard from Samantha since I moved. But sometimes when I'm walking down the street or sitting in a cafe, I catch myself scanning the crowd, half expecting to see her face. While I haven't sworn off dating completely, I approach it with a lot more caution now. And I always trust my gut when something feels off. So, if you're out there swiping on dating apps, remember my story. Be careful, be smart, and most importantly, be safe. You never know who might be hiding behind that perfect profile. Laura and I matched, and we hit it off right away. We chatted for a few weeks before deciding to meet in person. Our first date was great. She was sweet, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in me. We went out a few more times, and things were going well. But then things started to get strange. One night, after we'd been on a date, I got home to find Laura waiting outside my apartment building. She said she wanted to make sure I got home safely. It was a bit odd, but I brushed it off as her being caring. A week later, she showed up at my door unannounced with groceries. She decided to make dinner for me, saying she knew I'd have been eating a lot of takeout. I was surprised but went along with it. The meal was nice, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As time went on, Laura's behavior became more controlling. Whenever I mentioned going out with friends or needing some alone time, she'd appear at my place. She'd say she was worried about me and wanted to check in. It felt like she was always there, even when I didn't want her to be. She started trying to control every aspect of my life. My food choices, my schedule, even my friendships came under her scrutiny. She'd make comments about how certain foods weren't healthy enough, or how some of my friends were a bad influence. When I tried to set boundaries or ask for space, she'd get upset and cried, insisting she was only trying to help me be my best self. I started to feel suffocated. Laura was always around, always watching, always trying to improve me. I couldn't go anywhere without her knowing about it. She'd text constantly, asking where I was and who I was with. If I didn't respond quickly enough, she'd call repeatedly until I answered. My friends noticed the change in me. They said I seemed stressed and distant. When I confided in them about Laura's behavior, they were concerned. They urged me to end the relationship, but I felt trapped. Every time I tried to bring up issues with Laura, she'd turn it around on me, making me feel guilty for not appreciating her efforts. One day, I decided to go to the gym after work without telling Laura. When I got home, she was waiting in my apartment. She'd somehow gotten a spare key made without my knowledge. She was furious, accusing me of cheating and lying. I tried to explain, but she wouldn't listen. She went through my phone, my emails, everything. I felt violated and scared. Things came to a head and I decided to go on a weekend trip with some college buddies. I told Laura about it, hoping she'd understand my need for some time away. Instead, she showed up at my apartment the morning I was supposed to leave, saying she packed a bag and was coming along. When I told her she couldn't come, she broke down crying, accusing me of not loving her and threatening to hurt herself if I left. I realized then how deep I was in this toxic situation. I called my friends and canceled the trip, then spent the next few hours trying to calm Laura down. That weekend was a turning point for me. I knew I couldn't continue like this. Over the next week, I made a plan. I reached out to my support network, explaining the situation fully. My friends and family were alarmed but supportive. They helped me figure out how to safely end things with Laura. I chose a public place to meet her, bringing a friend along for support. Laura didn't take the breakup well. She cried, pleaded, and tried to guilt me into changing my mind. But I stood firm. I told her clearly that her behavior was unhealthy and that I couldn't be in a relationship with her anymore. The aftermath wasn't easy. Laura bombarded me with messages and calls for weeks. She showed up at my workplace and tried to contact my friends. I had to block her on all platforms and even considered getting a restraining order. Gradually, though, her attempts at contact decreased. It took time for me to feel normal again. I was jumpy for a while, always half expecting Laura to appear. But with support from my loved ones and some therapy, I started to heal. I learned a lot about recognizing red flags in relationships and the importance of maintaining healthy boundaries. I changed my routines, my phone number, and even moved apartments. It felt extreme, but it was necessary for my peace of mind. I took a break from dating altogether, focusing on rebuilding my relationships with friends and family that had suffered during my time with Laura. Months passed, and I slowly started to feel like myself again. I picked up new hobbies, made new friends, and even considered trying dating apps again. But the thought of another Laura made me hesitate. One day, I ran into an old friend at a coffee shop. We started chatting, and it felt natural and easy. There was no pressure, no expectations. We exchanged numbers and started hanging out more often. Slowly, a relationship developed, but this time it was different. We respected each other's space and independence. I learned that it was possible to have a healthy, loving relationship without losing myself. Looking back, I can see how things escalated gradually with Laura. What started as seemingly caring gestures turned into control and manipulation. It's scary how someone can go from a stranger on a dating app to having such a huge impact on your life in a short time. This experience changed how I approach relationships. I'm more cautious now, but also more aware of what I want and need in a partner. I've learned to trust my instincts when something feels off and to value my independence. I'm better at communicating my boundaries and expectations from the start. I've also become more empathetic towards others who might be in similar situations. I've shared my story with friends and even at support groups, hoping it might help someone recognize the signs of a toxic relationship earlier than I did. While I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone, it taught me valuable lessons. I'm stronger now, more assertive, and better at recognizing unhealthy behavior. I've learned the importance of self-care and maintaining a strong support network outside of romantic relationships. I still use dating apps occasionally, but I approach them with a different mindset. I take things slower, pay attention to red flags, and I'm not afraid to walk away if something doesn't feel right. I've learned that it's better to be single than to be in a relationship that diminishes who you are. My experience with Laura was a wake-up call. It showed me the dark side of what can happen when you ignore your instincts and let someone else take control of your life. but it also showed me my own strength and resilience. I got through it, and I'm a better person for it. Now, when I think about relationships, I focus on finding someone who adds to my life, not someone who tries to become my whole life. I look for mutual respect, open communication, and the ability to maintain individual identities within the relationship. I hope sharing my story might help others who find themselves in similar situations. Remember, it's okay to ask for help and to prioritize your own well-being in relationships. Trust your instincts, maintain your boundaries, and never let anyone make you feel like you're worth less than you are. There's a big difference between love and control, and recognizing that difference can save you from a lot of pain. I swiped right on Derek, a good-looking photographer in his early 30s. We chatted for a few days and he seemed nice, if a bit eager. When he offered to do a free photo shoot for me, I was flattered. He said it would be fun and professional, a chance to get some great pics for my profile. I figured why not. We agreed to meet on a Saturday afternoon. Derek picked me up in his car, saying he knew the perfect spot with amazing natural lighting. As we drove further out of the city, I started to feel a bit uneasy. The buildings and houses thinned out, replaced by more and more trees and open fields. After about 45 minutes, we turned onto a narrow dirt road. Almost there, Derek said cheerfully. I forced a smile and nodded, though my stomach was in knots. We finally stopped in a clearing surrounded by dense woods. There was an old, dilapidated barn and what looked like the ruins of a stone foundation nearby. Derek excitedly grabbed his camera gear from the trunk. At first, it wasn't so bad. Derek had me pose near some wildflowers, sitting on an old wooden fence, but as the shoot went on, his requests got stranger. He kept telling me to take off my jacket, even though it was chilly out. He had me lean way back on unstable-looking structures or stand precariously close to the edge of the crumbling foundation. I started to feel really uncomfortable. Every time I tried to take a break or suggest we wrap things up, Derek would insist on just a few more shots. He kept commenting on how raw and vulnerable I looked. The way he said it made my skin crawl. The sun was starting to set, and we'd been there for hours. My legs were sore from holding awkward poses, and I was cold without my jacket. I told Derek I needed to get home. That's when things took a truly scary turn. He stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the car. He said he still needed more photos, that we were just getting to the good stuff. I tried to step around him, but he grabbed my arm, squeezing hard enough to hurt. My heart was pounding as I realized how isolated we were. No one knew where I was. I had no cell service. Derek was bigger and stronger than me. Panic started to set in as I desperately tried to think a way out of this nightmare. I forced myself to stay calm on the outside. I plastered on a fake smile and told Derek I just needed to use the bathroom. Then we could continue. He hesitated, then gestured towards the woods. I walked away slowly, resisting the urge to run. Once I was out of his sight, I took off sprinting through the trees. I ran as fast and as far as I could, branches whipping my face. I had no idea where I was going, just trying to put distance between myself and Derek. After what felt like forever, I came to a road. Luckily, a car was approaching. I frantically waved it down, probably looking like a madwoman. An older couple stopped and I blurted out that I needed help. They let me use their phone to call the police, then waited with me until help arrived. I was shaken and scraped up, but so relieved to be safe. The police took my statement and sent officers to search for Derek, but he was long gone by then. They found his car abandoned nearby. Turns out he'd used a fake name and burner phone for our Tinder chats. It's been a few months, and they still haven't caught him. I can't help wondering if he's done this to other women, or if he will again. The whole experience left me shaken and wary. I deleted all my dating apps, and I'm still working through the trauma with a therapist. Looking back, there were red flags I should have noticed. Derek was overly complimentary from the start, always pushing for more personal information. He was vague about his own life and changed the subject when I asked questions. The photo shoot offer came really quickly before we even met in person. I kicked myself for not trusting my gut when things felt off, like when he insisted on picking me up instead of meeting at the location, or when he kept driving further and further from the city. I should have spoken up, asked to turn back, but I didn't want to seem rude or paranoid. During the shoot, I ignored so many warning signs. The way Derek's eyes lingered too long, how he kept inching closer as he adjusted my poses. His voice got lower, almost growly, when he told me how good I looked. I felt like prey being stalked, but I pushed the feeling down. I've replayed that day in my mind 1,000 times. What if I hadn't managed to get away? What was Derek planning to do? The police found some disturbing things in his abandoned car: rope, duct tape, a knife. It makes me sick to think about. For a while after, I was too scared to leave my apartment. I jumped at every sound, convinced Derek had found me. I couldn't sleep without nightmares. Even now, months later, I feel on edge in public. I'm always looking over my shoulder, scanning for potential threats. My friends and family have been supportive, but I can tell they don't fully get it. They think I'm being paranoid, that I should just move on. But it's not that easy. The fear and trauma linger, coloring everything. I'm slowly putting my life back together. Therapy has helped a lot. I'm learning to trust my instincts again, to set boundaries. I've started going out more, even dating a little. But I'm much more cautious now. I always meet in public places and tell someone where I'm going. I carried pepper spray and took a self-defense class. Sometimes I get angry. At Derek, at myself, at a world where women have to be constantly on guard. But mostly I'm grateful. Grateful I escaped. Grateful for the kind strangers who helped me. Grateful for the support I've received in healing. I know my story could have ended much worse. I hope sharing it might help someone else avoid a similar situation. Trust your gut if something feels off. It's better to seem rude than end up in danger. Be careful about giving out personal information online. Meet in public places. Tell someone where you're going and who you're meeting. I'm still working on forgiving myself for ignoring the red flags that day. I know intellectually that it wasn't my fault, that Derek was the one who chose to be a predator. But emotionally, it's hard not to feel like I should have known better. There are still days when the memories overwhelm me. When I see a guy who looks like Derek or drive past wooded areas like where he took me. But those moments are getting less frequent. I'm reclaiming my life bit by bit. I don't know if they'll ever catch Derek. Part of me hopes they do so he can't hurt anyone else. But another part dreads the idea of having to see him again, even in court. For now, I'm focused on my own healing and moving forward. I've told my friends about what happened, urging them to be careful too. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a new connection, but safety has to come first. That apartment will haunt me for a long time. The stage feeling, the unsettling photos, that locked door. I shudder to think what might have been behind it. In the weeks after, I found myself jumping at small noises and constantly checking over my shoulder. I was worried Noel might try to find me somehow, but as time passed without incident, I slowly started to relax. I'm sharing my story as a warning to others. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore red flags just because you want to believe the best in someone. And always prioritize your safety over politeness or not wanting to seem rude. That experience changed how I approach dating and meeting new people in general. I'm more cautious now, but I try not to let fear control me. I still use dating apps occasionally, but I take things much slower and am very selective about who I meet in person. Sometimes I wonder about Noel. Was that his real name? His real apartment? What happened to the woman in those photos? I'll probably never know the full truth. Part of me wants answers, but mostly I'm just relieved I got away. I hope my story helps someone else avoid a potentially dangerous situation. Online dating can be great, but it's important to stay alert and trust your gut. That nagging feeling when things seem off could save your life. I'm more aware now how easy it is for people to hide their true selves online. A charming persona can mask sinister intentions. It's a sobering reality of the digital age we live in. Despite everything, I try not to let that experience make me overly paranoid or distrustful. I've met some wonderful people through apps and online communities, but I approach new connections with a healthy dose of caution now. If I could go back, I'd tell my past self to listen to that little voice of doubt sooner. To not brush off the red flags out of optimism or wishful thinking. To put my safety above someone else's feelings or avoiding an awkward situation. I'm grateful every day that I made it out of that apartment unharmed. The whole incident serves as a stark reminder that you never truly know someone until you spend significant time with them in person. And even then, people can hide dark secrets. My advice to anyone in the dating world: take things slow, meet in public, tell friends your plans, and most importantly, trust your instincts. That uneasy feeling could be your subconscious picking up on danger signs your conscious mind is trying to ignore. Stay safe out there. A little caution and awareness can go a long way in protecting yourself while still being open to new connections. Just remember that your well being should always come first. I've told my friends about what happened, urging them to be careful too. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a new connection, but safety has to come first. That apartment will haunt me for a long time. The stage feeling, the unsettling photos, that locked door. I shudder to think what might have been behind it. In the weeks after, I found myself jumping at small noises and constantly checking over my shoulder. I was worried Noel might try to find me somehow, but as time passed without incident, I slowly started to relax. I'm sharing my story as a warning to others. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore red flags just because you want to believe the best in someone. And always prioritize your safety over politeness or not wanting to seem rude. That experience changed how I approach dating and meeting new people in general. I'm more cautious now, but I try not to let fear control me. I still use dating apps occasionally, but I take things much slower and am very selective about who I meet in person. Sometimes I wonder about Noel. Was that his real name? His real apartment? What happened to the woman in those photos? I'll probably never know the full truth. Part of me wants answers, but mostly I'm just relieved I got away. I hope my story helps someone else avoid a potentially dangerous situation. Online dating can be great, but it's important to stay alert and trust your gut. That nagging feeling when things seem off could save your life. I'm more aware now of how easy it is for people to hide their true selves online. A charming persona can mask sinister intentions. It's a sobering reality of the digital age we live in. Despite everything, I try not to let that experience make me overly paranoid or distrustful. I've met some wonderful people through apps and online communities, but I approach new connections with a healthy dose of caution now. If I could go back, I'd tell my past self to listen to that little voice of doubt sooner, to not brush off the red flags out of optimism or wishful thinking, to put my safety above someone else's feelings or avoiding an awkward situation. I'm grateful every day that I made it out of that apartment unharmed. The whole incident serves as a stark reminder that you never truly know someone until you spend significant time with them in person. And even then, people can hide dark secrets. My advice to anyone in the dating world: take things slow, meet in public, tell friends your plans, and most importantly, trust your instincts. That uneasy feeling could be your subconscious picking up on danger signs your conscious mind is trying to ignore. Stay safe out there. A little caution and awareness can go a long way in protecting yourself while still being open to new connections. Just remember that your well being should always come first. I matched with Lewis on Tinder last week. His profile seemed normal enough, cute guy, decent job, witty bio. We hit it off chatting and decided to meet for dinner at this trendy new Italian place downtown. The date started off great. Lewis was even more charming in person than online. We talked and laughed over appetizers and wine. He asked thoughtful questions about my job and hobbies. I found myself really enjoying his company. About an hour in, our entrees arrived. Lewis excused himself to take a call, saying it was work-related. I didn't think much of it and started on my pasta. 5 minutes passed, then 10. After 15 minutes, I was getting antsy. Where was he? I sent a quick text asking if everything was okay. No response. I flagged down our server to ask if she'd seen Lewis. She looked confused and said he paid the bill at the bar about 10 minutes ago, then left. What? That made no sense. Why would he just leave without saying anything? Thoroughly weirded out, I gathered my things and headed for the exit. Maybe there was some misunderstanding that he was waiting outside. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, my stomach dropped. Lewis was standing there perfectly still, staring blankly ahead. His face was totally expressionless, like a mannequin. I cautiously approached him, asking what happened and why he left. He turned to me robotically and asked if I was ready to begin our date. His voice was flat and emotionless. Confused, I reminded him we'd just spent 2 hours having dinner together. He insisted I must be mistaken. Our date hadn't started yet. A chill ran down my spine. What was going on? I tried to jog his memory, mentioning specific things we'd talked about over dinner, but he just kept smiling vacantly and repeating that I was confused. It was like the last 2 hours had been erased from his mind. At this point, I was seriously freaked out. This wasn't normal behavior. Was this some kind of prank? A mental health episode? Or something more sinister? I told Lewis I wasn't feeling well and needed to go home. He nodded pleasantly, still smiling that eerie smile. As I hurried to my car, I could feel his eyes boring into my back. The whole drive home, I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Louis' blank face staring back at me. I triple-checked that my doors were locked when I got home. I hardly slept that night, replaying the bizarre evening in my head. In the light of day, I wondered if I'd imagined or exaggerated things, but I knew what I'd experienced was real. Out of morbid curiosity, I checked Lou's Tinder profile the next day. It had vanished without a trace. I couldn't find any trace of him on social media either. It was like he'd never existed. For weeks afterward, I was jumpy and on edge. I kept thinking I glimpsed Lou's face in crowds or saw his car following me, but it always turned out to be nothing. Eventually, the anxiety faded and life went back to normal. But I never quite shook the uneasy feeling from that night. What really happened, who or what was Louis, I'll probably never know. These days, I'm a lot more cautious about online dating. I always meet in public places and tell friends where I'm going, and I trust my instincts if something feels off. Sometimes I wonder if other women have had similar experiences with Louis. Is he still out there, luring in unsuspecting dates? The thought makes my skin crawl. I've considered reporting what happened to the police, but what would I even say? I don't have any proof, just a bizarre story that sounds crazy when I say it out loud. Part of me wants to forget that night ever happened, to write it off as a weird fluke and move on with my life. But another part can't let it go. I find myself scanning faces in crowds, half expecting to see that vacant stare again. I know rationally that Louis probably won't reappear in my life, but late at night when I'm alone, I still sometimes imagine him standing outside my window, waiting, smiling that empty smile. Maybe one day I'll work up the courage to dig deeper into what happened, to try and find answers. But for now, I'm content to leave that chapter of my life firmly in the past. If nothing else, my experience with Louis taught me an important lesson. You never truly know who's on the other side of that screen. A charming profile and witty messages can hide all kinds of darkness. So with anyone out there navigating the treacherous waters of online dating, be careful. Trust your gut, and maybe think twice before meeting that perfect seeming match. As for me, I think I'll be sticking to meeting people the old-fashioned way for a while. At least then I can be reasonably sure the person across from me is human. It's been 6 months since that night, and I've mostly put it behind me. But every so often, something will trigger a memory, a familiar cologne, a certain smile, and I'll feel that same chill down my spine. I've tried to rationalize what happened. Maybe Louis had some kind of dissociative episode. Maybe he was on drugs. Maybe it was an elaborate prank gone wrong. But none of these explanations quite fit. The worst part is not knowing. I'll never have closure, never understand what really happened that night. It's like a splinter in my mind, a nagging question I can't answer. I've done some research into similar stories online. There are a few accounts that sound eerily familiar. Dates that suddenly reset or people who seem to change personalities mid-evening, but nothing concrete enough to draw any conclusions. Sometimes I wonder if I should have pushed harder that night, asked more questions, demanded answers. But in the moment, all I wanted was to get away as fast as possible. I had a few dates since then, but nothing serious. It's hard to open up and trust someone new when you've had an experience like mine. I find myself analyzing every interaction, looking for signs that something's not right. My friends have mostly stopped asking about it. I think they assume I've moved on, that it's old news. And in many ways I have, but there's still a part of me that's forever changed by that night. I never thought a Tinder date could go so wrong. It started off normal enough. Mindy and I matched, chatted for a bit, and decided to meet up for dinner. She seemed nice in her photos, and our texting banter was fun. I was looking forward to meeting her in person. We picked a cozy Italian place downtown. When I arrived, Mindy was already there, sipping a glass of white wine. She looked just like her pictures, petite with long dark hair and a warm smile. I felt relieved, at least I wasn't being catfished. We ordered our food and started with the usual first date small talk. Where are you from? What do you do for work? Mindy told me she grew up in a small town upstate and moved to the city for college. She worked in marketing now, pretty standard stuff. But as the night went on, I started noticing something odd. Mindy was sharing personal stories, which I appreciated. It showed she was open and wanted to connect. The problem was the details in her stories kept changing. At first, it was small things I barely noticed. She mentioned her best friend from high school was named Sarah. Later, when telling another story about the same friend, she called her Amy. I figured I must have misheard the first time. Then it was places. She talked about her favorite beach town she visited every summer as a kid. Early in the night, it was on the East Coast. By dessert, she was describing it as a West Coast surf spot. The inconsistencies kept piling up. Her brother's name changed from Mike to Matt. The company she interned for in college went from a tech startup to a fashion magazine. Even the type of dog her family had growing up morphed from a golden retriever to a pug. I started to feel uneasy. Was I going crazy? Had I drank too much wine and gotten confused? I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I decided to ask some clarifying questions, hoping there was a simple explanation. Wait, I thought you said your brother's name was Mike. Mindy's demeanor changed instantly. Her eyes narrowed slightly and her smile became tight. She let out a high-pitched laugh that sounded forced. Oh, did I say Mike? I meant Matt, silly me. She quickly changed the subject. This pattern repeated itself throughout the night. Any time I tried to get her to explain an inconsistency, she'd deflect or laugh it off. She started to seem annoyed by my questions. I felt like I was going crazy. By the end of dinner, I had no idea who I was actually talking to. It was like Mindy was making up her entire life story on the spot, forgetting what she'd said earlier and improvising new details. Nothing about her background seemed real or consistent. I was relieved when the check came. I just wanted to get out of there and try to make sense of what had happened. As we were saying goodbye outside the restaurant, Mindy gave me a strange look. We're bound to cross paths again, she said with an oddly knowing smile. A chill ran down my spine. The way she said it made me wonder if she'd been lying about more than just her stories. Did she know something I didn't? Was this whole night some kind of setup? I hurried home, double-checking over my shoulder to make sure I wasn't being followed. When I got to my apartment, I immediately deleted my Tinder account. I didn't want to risk matching with Mindy, or whoever she really was, ever again. For days afterwards, I felt on edge. I kept replaying the night in my head, trying to figure out what Mindy's angle was. Was she just a pathological liar who couldn't keep her stories straight? Or was there something more sinister going on? I found myself paying extra attention to people around me on my commute at work. Was that one on the subway platform Mindy in a wig? Did that guy at the coffee shop look suspiciously like her brother she described? A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. Told you we'd cross paths again. I nearly dropped my phone in shock. How did she get my number? I'd only communicated with her through the Tinder app. I blocked the number immediately, but the damage was done. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mindy was out there somewhere, watching and waiting. Every time I turned a corner or entered a crowded space, I half expected to see her standing there with that knowing smile. Months have passed, and nothing else has happened. No more mysterious texts or sightings of Mindy, but I still can't forget that disastrous Tinder date. It taught me a valuable lesson about trusting strangers online and trusting my instincts when something feels off. These days, I'm much more cautious about online dating. I'll always meet matches in public places and let a friend know where I'll be. I pay close attention to the details people share and trust my gut if something seems inconsistent. Sometimes I wonder if I'd overreacted that night. Maybe Mindy was just nervous and got flustered with her stories. But deep down, I know something wasn't right. The way she deflected my questions and that final ominous comment as we parted ways. It all points to something more calculated. I'll probably never know the full truth about Mindy or her motives that night. Was she a con artist? A stalker? Just a very committed pathological liar? Whenever the case, that Tinder horror story serves as a reminder to always stay alert, even on something as seemingly harmless as a first date. So if you're swiping through dating apps and come across a profile for a petite brunette named Mindy who works in marketing, my advice is simple: swipe left. You never know what kind of twisted game you might be getting yourself into. I matched with Prudence on Tinder last week. Her profile seemed normal enough: cute pics, witty bio, the usual stuff. We chatted for a few days and things were going well, so we decided to meet up for drinks. The date started off pretty standard. We met at a local bar, had a couple beers, and made small talk about our jobs and hobbies. Prudence was attractive and charming in person. She had this quirky, offbeat sense of humor that I found endearing. As the night went on, I started to feel a real connection forming. After a couple hours at the bar, Prudence suggested we head back to her place to watch a movie. I was definitely into her at this point, so I agreed without hesitation. Her apartment was only a few blocks away, So we walked there together, laughing and flirting the whole way. When we got to her place, I was immediately struck by how nice it was. Exposed brick walls, high ceilings, fancy furniture, the works. Prudence gave me a quick tour, showing me the living room, kitchen, and bathroom. As we were walking down the hallway, she paused in front of a closed door. "Want to see something unique?" she asked with a coy smile. I nodded, figuring she was going to show me some art or maybe a cool collection of some kind. Boy, was I wrong. Prudence opened the door and flicked on the lights. My jaw dropped as I took in the scene before me. Every inch of wall space was covered in knives. Hundreds of them, maybe even thousands, in all shapes and sizes. Some looked ancient and ornate, others sleek and modern. A few were so massive they seemed more like swords than knives. I stood there in stunned silence as Prudence casually strolled into the room. She started pointing out different knives, explaining their origins and special features. Her eyes lit up as she described the craftsmanship and history behind each piece. It was clear this was a huge passion for her. At first, I tried to play it cool. I nodded along and made interested noises as she spoke. But as the minutes ticked by, I started to feel more and more uneasy. There was just something unsettling about being in a room full of weapons with a virtual stranger. My discomfort must have shown on my face, because Prudence stopped mid-sentence and gave me a quizzical look. She asked if I was okay and mumbled something about being surprised by her collection. She laughed it off, saying most people react that way at first. I thought that would be the end of it. I figured we'd head back to the living room, put on a movie, and try to forget about the knife room. But Prudence had other ideas. She walked over to one of the displays and carefully lifted a wicked-looking dagger off its mount. The blade was about 8 inches long, curved and serrated. The handle was wrapped in what looked like snakeskin. Prudence held the knife out in front of her, turning it this way and that so the blade caught the light. She started talking about the rush she gets from holding such a powerful object, how it makes her feel strong and in control. As she spoke, her voice took on an intensity I hadn't heard before. Her eyes had a wild gleam that sent chills down my spine. She kept gesturing with the knife as she talked, bringing it uncomfortably close to my face at times. I took a few steps back, trying to put some distance between us. But Prudence just moved closer, still brandishing the dagger. She must have sensed my unease because she tried to lighten the mood by cracking a joke about being a knife collector, not a knife wielder. But her laughter had an edge to it that did nothing to calm my nerves, and she still wasn't putting the knife down. My mind started racing, trying to figure out how to extract myself from this situation. Should I make an excuse and leave? Try to change the subject? Was I overreacting to an eccentric but ultimately harmless hobby? As these thoughts swirled in my head, Prudence's monologue took an even darker turn. She started describing in vivid detail how certain knives could be used to inflict maximum damage on the human body, the way different blade shapes affected blood flow and tissue damage, how to hit major arteries for the quickest results. That was the final straw for me. All the alarm bells in my head were clanging at full volume. I stammered out some lame excuse about feeling sick and needing to go home. Prudence's face fell, but she nodded in understanding. As we walked back down the hallway, I could have sworn I heard her mutter something under her breath. It sounded like, "Shame, you seemed like such a good candidate." But maybe that was just my imagination running wild. I practically sprinted out of her apartment building and didn't stop moving until I was safely back in my own home. I blocked Prudence's number and unmatched her on Tinder immediately. It's been a few days now, and part of me wonders if I overreacted. Maybe Prudence really was just an enthusiastic collector with an uncommon hobby. But then I remember the glint in her eye as she wielded that dagger, and I know I made the right call in getting out of there. I'm still using Tinder, but I'm definitely more cautious now about meeting up with matches. And you can bet I'll be asking a lot more questions before I agree to go back to anyone's place, because you never know what kind of unique things they might want to show you. I thought I'd struck gold when I matched with Rahul on Tinder. His profile pic showed a handsome guy with a warm smile, and our chats were fun and easygoing. We hit it off right away, bonding over our shared love of hiking and trying new restaurants. After a week of messaging, we decided to meet up for dinner at a cozy Italian place downtown. As I walked into the restaurant, I spotted Rahul at a corner table. He stood up to greet me, and I noticed he was even more attractive in person. We sat down and started chatting, and at first, Everything seemed great. He was charming and attentive, asking me questions about my job and hobbies. But as the conversation went on, I started to notice some red flags. Rahul kept bringing up his family, which wasn't weird in itself, but the way he talked about them was off. He mentioned that he doesn't waste time with women his family wouldn't approve of. At first, I thought he was just joking around, but his tone was dead serious. As we ate our pasta, Rahul launched into a long explanation of how he was raised. He went on and on about the importance of obedience and respect in his family. The way he described it made me feel uncomfortable, like he was talking about training a dog rather than raising a child. I tried to steer the conversation to lighter topics, but Rahul kept circling back to his family's expectations. He started hinting that he expected his future partner to meet his family's strict criteria. The way he looked at me while saying this made me feel like I was being sized up, like he was mentally checking off boxes on some list. By the time we ordered dessert, I was feeling pretty uneasy. Rahul had barely asked me anything about myself or my own family. Instead, he kept dropping comments about how his future wife would need to measure up to his family's standards. He talked about how she'd need to be a good cook, keep a spotless house, and always defer to his judgment. I was starting to feel trapped, like I'd stumbled into some weird alternate reality where it was still the 1950s. I kept trying to find an excuse to end the date early, but Rahul seemed oblivious to my discomfort. He just kept talking, outlining his vision for his future family life in excruciating detail. As we finished our tiramisu, I thought the nightmare was finally ending. But then Rahul dropped a bombshell. He invited me to come to his family's house that night to meet his mother. I nearly choked on my coffee. We'd known each other for all of an hour, and he was already planning to introduce me to his family. And that's when it hit me. Rahul wasn't joking. He wasn't exaggerating. He was dead serious about all of this. In his mind, our first date was just a formality. He'd already decided I was going to be part of his controlled, regimented life. I mumbled some excuse about having an early meeting the next day and then practically ran out of the restaurant. As I speed walked to my car, my mind was reeling. How had a simple Tinder date turned into this bizarre nightmare? Once I was safely in my car, I took a deep breath and tried to process what had just happened. I couldn't believe how quickly things had gone off the rails. What had started as a promising date had turned into a horror story about arranged marriages and outdated gender roles. I drove home in a daze, still trying to wrap my head around the evening's events. As soon as I got home, I deleted Tinder from my phone. I knew not all guys on the app were like Rahul, but the experience had left me feeling shaken and wary. For the next few days, I kept replaying the date in my mind, wondering if I'd missed any early warning signs. Maybe there had been clues in our chats that I'd overlooked. Or maybe Rahul was just really good at hiding his true self until he had someone face to face. I told my friends about the disaster date, and we all had a good laugh about it. But underneath the humor, I felt a lingering sense of unease. It was a stark reminder that you never really know who you're meeting when you go on a date with a stranger. Looking back, I'm grateful that Rahul showed his true colors so quickly. As uncomfortable as that date was, it could have been much worse if I'd gotten more involved before realizing what he was really like. It was a harsh lesson, but one that ultimately made me smarter and safer in my dating life. The Rahul incident became a cautionary tale among my friend group, a go-to story for bad date nights and girls' night out. We'd laugh about his detailed plans for his future wife and his eagerness to introduce me to his mother. But beneath the laughter, there was always a note of relief that I'd gotten out of there when I did. I never thought my Tinder date would turn into such a nightmare. It all started when I matched with Jordan. His profile seemed normal enough, cute guy, nice smile, decent job. We chatted for a few days and he came across as sweet and a bit shy. When he asked me out for coffee, I figured why not. The day of our date arrived and I got to the coffee shop a few minutes early. Jordan showed up right on time, but immediately started apologizing for being late. I assured him he wasn't late at all, but he kept insisting he should have been there before me. It was a little odd, but I brushed it off as first date nerves. We got in line to order and Jordan asked what I wanted. I told him just a latte was fine. He nodded, then proceeded to order me the wrong drink. When the barista called out our order and I noticed the mistake, Jordan's face fell. He started stammering out apologies, saying he must have misheard me and he'd go back and fix it right away. I told him it really wasn't a big deal, but he seemed genuinely distressed about it. As we sat down with our drinks, Jordan's constant apologizing continued. Every time he'd take a sip or shift in his chair, He'd mutter sorry under his breath. If he interrupted me mid-sentence, even just to agree with what I was saying, he'd apologize profusely. At first, I found it kind of endearing in a way, like he was just nervous and trying really hard to make a good impression. But after an hour of nonstop apologies, it started to get on my nerves. I tried to steer the conversation to other topics, asking about his job and hobbies. But no matter what we talked about, Jordan found a way to turn it into something he needed to apologize for. He'd share an opinion, then immediately backtrack and say sorry if I didn't explicitly agree. He kept asking if I was having a good time, if I was disappointed, if there was anything he could do better. By the end of the date, I was mentally exhausted. Jordan's anxiety and insecurity were palpable. As we were saying goodbye, he launched into another round of apologies for probably boring me and messing everything up. I reassured him again that it was fine and I'd had a nice time. That seemed to calm him down a bit, and we parted ways. I figured that would be the end of it, an awkward first date story to laugh about later. But the next day, my phone started blowing up with texts from Jordan. He was still apologizing for every little thing from our date. He'd clearly been obsessing over every detail, convinced he'd made a terrible impression. I tried to politely tell him it wasn't necessary to keep apologizing, but that only made him more intense. Jordan started sending longer and longer messages, explaining how he just couldn't stand the thought of disappointing me. He promised he'd make it up to me if I gave him another chance. When I didn't respond right away, the messages got more frantic. He said he understood if I never wanted to see him again, but he at least needed to apologize in person one more time. I was starting to get a little freaked out by his behavior, so I firmly told Jordan that I appreciated the thought, but didn't think we were a good match. I wished him well and said goodbye. I thought that would be the end of it. But a few days later, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, there was Jordan standing on my porch with flowers. My stomach dropped. I had never told him where I lived. He must have looked me up somehow. Jordan started rambling about how sorry he was for bothering me, but he just had to see me face to face to apologize properly. I was in shock and didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face, but I was also scared of setting him off. So I awkwardly accepted the flowers and told him he really didn't need to come all this way. Jordan nodded eagerly, saying he knew it was crazy, but he couldn't help himself. He promised it would never happen again. As Jordan was leaving, he turned back and asked if we could try one more date. He swore he'd be normal this time and wouldn't apologize at all if that's what I wanted. The desperation in his voice made me deeply uncomfortable. I mumbled something non-committal about being busy and quickly went back inside. That night, I got a string of texts from Jordan thanking me for being so understanding and detailing all the ways he'd make our next date perfect. It was clear he had completely misread the situation and thought there was still a chance. I didn't know what to do. I was genuinely scared of how he might react if I outright rejected him again. The next day, I went to the police station to file a report about Jordan showing up at my house uninvited. They took my statement but said there wasn't much they could do since he hadn't explicitly threatened me. They advised me to block his number and social media accounts and to call the police if he showed up again. I followed their advice and blocked Jordan everywhere I could think of. For weeks afterward, I was constantly on edge, worried he'd find some other way to contact me or show up at my door again. I kept replaying our interactions in my head, wondering if I'd somehow encouraged his behavior or if I could have handled things differently. Gradually, the fear faded and life went back to normal. But to this day, I'm much more cautious about online dating. That experience with Jordan showed me how quickly things can spiral out of control, even with someone who seemed harmless at first. I'll never forget the feeling of violation when he showed up at my home uninvited. It was a harsh reminder that you can never be too careful when meeting strangers from the internet. I matched with Diana on Tinder last weekend. Her profile seemed normal enough, cute pics, basic bio about loving travel and dogs. We chatted for a few days and decided to meet up for drinks on Friday night. I got to the bar a few minutes early and grabbed us a table. When Diana walked in, I was relieved to see she looked just like her photos. Attractive, well-dressed, confident. We exchanged hellos and I offered to get her a drink from the bar. Things started off okay as we made small talk about our weeks, but after about 10 minutes, Diana started asking more pointed questions about my job. At first it seemed like normal first date stuff. What do you do? Do you like it? Etc. But then she wanted to know specifics about my salary, bonuses, and growth potential. I tried to keep things vague, saying I was comfortable but always looking to advance. Diana pressed further, asking if I made six figures yet. When I admitted I didn't, she looked visibly disappointed. The conversation took an even weirder turn when Diana started talking about her ideal lifestyle. She went on about wanting to live in an upscale neighborhood, take luxury vacations, and shop designer brands. It was clear she expected a partner who could bankroll all of this. I attempted to steer us to lighter topics, asking about her hobbies and interests. But Diana always found a way to circle back to finances. She grilled me on my monthly budget, wanting to know exactly how much I spent on rent, bills, and discretionary expenses. At one point, she even asked about my credit score and savings account balance. I was stunned. Who asked that on a first date? I deflected, saying I wasn't comfortable sharing those details. Diana's eyes narrowed and she accused me of being evasive. The night wore on and I grew increasingly uncomfortable. Every time I tried to change the subject, Diana would get visibly irritated. She kept emphasizing how important financial stability was to her in a relationship. The message was clear. If I couldn't provide the lavish lifestyle she wanted, I wasn't worth her time. I excused myself to use the restroom, needing a moment to collect my thoughts. This was easily the strangest, most uncomfortable date I'd ever been on. Diana's hyper-focus on money felt intrusive and off-putting. I debated making up an excuse to leave early. When I returned to the table, Diana launched into a speech about how she was a high-value woman who knew her worth. She said she refused to settle for someone who couldn't meet her standards. The whole thing felt rehearsed, like she'd given this speech many times before. I had enough at this point. I politely but firmly told Diana that I didn't think we were compatible. She scoffed and said I was clearly intimidated by a strong woman who knew what she wanted. According to her, I was playing games by not being upfront about my finances. As I gathered my things to leave, Diana's demeanor completely changed. She went from haughty to hostile in an instant. She sneered that I was probably broke and that she dodged a bullet. I just shook my head and walked out, ignoring her continued insults. The whole experience left me feeling drained and a bit shaken. I'd encountered my fair share of bad dates, but nothing like this before. Diana's obsession with money and status was unsettling. It was as if she viewed relationships as purely transactional. As I walked home, I couldn't help but wonder how many other guys Diana had subjected to this treatment. Did she ever find someone willing to bankroll her champagne wishes and caviar dreams? Or was she doomed to endlessly search for her ideal sugar daddy? I deleted my Tinder app as soon as I got home. After that disaster, I needed a break from dating. The thought of potentially matching with another Diana made me shudder. I'd rather be single than deal with someone so fixated on finances. Looking back, there were probably some red flags I missed in our initial chats, but I never could have predicted how the date would unfold. It was a stark reminder that you never truly know someone until you meet in person. I told a few friends about the date, and they were equally appalled. We speculated about what would drive someone to be so blatantly materialistic. Maybe Diana had been hurt in the past by financial instability, or perhaps she'd grown up wealthy and couldn't fathom living any other way. Whatever her reasons, I hoped Diana would eventually realize that there's more to compatibility than just money. A truly fulfilling relationship is built on shared values, emotional connection, and mutual respect, not designer handbags and fancy vacations. For now, I'm taking a step back from the dating scene. When I do decide to get back out there, I'll be much more cautious. I'll run for the hills if anyone starts prying into my finances on the first date. I matched with Selena on Tinder last week. Her profile seemed normal enough, cute pics, basic bio about loving animals and hiking. We chatted for a few days and she seemed nice, a bit intense about her pets. When she invited me over to meet them, I figured why not? I like animals too. I showed up at her apartment building on Friday night. It was in a decent area, nothing sketchy. Selena buzzed me up and greeted me at the door with a big smile. She was prettier in person, with long dark hair and bright eyes. The first thing I noticed when I walked in was the smell, kind of musty and damp. Then I saw the cages. They were everywhere, stacked along the walls on every available surface. And they weren't holding the usual cats or dogs. These cages contained all sorts of exotic creatures, colorful birds, scaly reptiles, furry rodents. It was like walking into a mini zoo. Selena didn't seem to notice my surprise. She immediately launched into showing me around, pointing out each animal. There were bearded dragons, leopard geckos, a ball python, parakeets, finches, hamsters, gerbils, even a chinchilla. She knew all their names and backstories. At first, I was kind of impressed by her dedication, but as she went on and on about their care routines, feeding schedules, and behaviors, I started to feel uneasy. The way she talked about the animals was strange, less like pets and more like possessions. She kept emphasizing how much work they were, how dependent they were on her. She showed me a grumpy looking iguana, calling him her special boy. She went on about how needy he was, always wanting attention, but she was the only one who knew just how to handle him. I nodded and smiled, not sure how to respond. She moved on to a cage of mice, cooing at them and calling them precious. She talked about how small and helpless they were, how they rely on her completely. That's when I noticed the gleam in her eye as she watched the little creatures scurrying around. It wasn't affection, it was satisfaction. She looked hungry almost. My skin started to crawl. I made an excuse about needing to use the bathroom. As I walked down the hall, I glanced in the other rooms. More cages. Tanks stacked to the ceiling. The bedroom was the worst. The bed was surrounded by terrariums, like she slept in the middle of her personal menagerie. When I came back out, Selena was waiting with an expectant smile. She asked what I thought, calling the animals wonderful. I mumbled something positive, not meeting her eyes. She kept talking, going into even more detail about her babies, how she rescued most of them, nursed them back to health, how they'd be helpless without her. Then she said something that really freaked me out. She mentioned how sometimes she wished people were more like her pets. So loyal, so obedient. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The way she was looking at me made me feel like I was behind the bars of one of those cages, like she was imagining how she'd take care of me, control my every move. I knew I needed to get out of there. I made up a story about forgetting I had plans with a friend. Selena's face fell, but she walked me to the door. As I was leaving, she grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. She asked if I'd come back soon to see the animals again. I nodded quickly and pulled away. As soon as I got outside, I took a deep breath of fresh air. My heart was racing. I'd been on some bad Tinder dates before, but nothing like this. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd narrowly escaped something sinister. I unmatched Selena as soon as I got home, but for days afterward, I kept thinking about those animals in their cages, about the hungry look in her eyes, about what might have happened if I'd stayed longer. I took a break from dating apps after that. When I did start using them again, I was a lot more cautious. I always met matches in public first. I'd have definitely steered clear of anyone who seemed too into their pets. I still think about Selena sometimes. I wonder if she's still collecting animals, if her apartment is even more crowded now. Part of me wants to report her to animal control or something, but I have no proof she was doing anything illegal. For all I know, those creatures are well cared for, even if the situation seems off. Mostly, I'm just glad I trusted my instincts and got out of there. It's a reminder that you never really know who you're meeting online. People can seem totally normal at first, then turn out to be not what you expected. I'm more careful now about the signs I might have missed before. That night still haunts me a bit. Sometimes I have nightmares where I'm trapped in one of those cages with Selena peering in at me, watching, waiting, hungry. I've also become more observant on first dates. I watch for signs that someone might not be who they claim to be online. Little inconsistencies in their stories, odd behaviors, anything that sets off alarm bells. It's made me a bit paranoid, maybe, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. The thing that sticks with me most is how normal Selena seemed at first. If I hadn't gone to her apartment, I might never have known about her weird obsession. It makes me wonder how many other people are hiding strange secrets behind their carefully curated online personas. I've tried to rationalize Selena's behavior. Maybe she was just really passionate about animal rescue. Maybe she was lonely and the pets were her way of feeling needed. But I can't shake the feeling that there was something darker going on. The way she talked about control and obedience, it wasn't healthy. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed longer that night. Would Selena have revealed more about herself? Would she have tried to keep me there somehow? I imagine scenarios where I end up trapped in that apartment, surrounded by cages, becoming another one of her pets. It's ridiculous, I know, but the thought still gives me chills. It started off like any other match, a few messages back and forth, some light banter, and then we agreed to meet up for coffee. Stanley seemed nice enough in his profile. He was into fitness, which was cool, and his photo showed a guy who clearly took care of himself. When I got to the cafe, I spotted him right away. He looked just like his pictures, tall, muscular, with a chiseled jawline. As I walked over, I noticed his eyes scanning me up and down. It made me a little self-conscious, but I brushed it off. We said hello and ordered our drinks. At first, the conversation was normal. We talked about our jobs, hobbies, the usual first date small talk. Stanley mentioned he was really into health and fitness, which I already knew from his profile. He asked if I worked out, and I said I tried to get to the gym a couple times a week. That's when things started to get weird. Stanley launched into a whole speech about optimizing health and how most people don't take it seriously enough. He kept using phrases like biohacking and reaching peak performance. I nodded along, not really sure what to say. Then he started peppering me with questions about my lifestyle. How many hours of sleep did I get each night? What was my typical daily diet? Did I track my macros? How often did I do cardio versus strength training? At first I tried to answer, but the questions kept coming. It felt less like a date and more like an interrogation. I started to get uncomfortable. I tried to change the subject, asking about his hobbies outside of fitness, but Stanley always managed to bring it back around to health. He started giving me unsolicited advice, telling me I should be doing intermittent fasting and high-intensity interval training. According to him, I needed to optimize my sleep environment and cut out all processed foods. When I joked that this was a bit intense for a first date, Stanley's whole demeanor changed. His face got really serious, almost angry. He said he didn't waste time with people who didn't take their health seriously. Then he looked me up and down again and said I could stand to lose a few pounds anyway. I was stunned. Who says that to someone they just met? I felt my cheeks getting hot with embarrassment and anger. But Stanley didn't seem to notice or care. He just kept talking about how he could tell exactly what I needed to do to improve myself. The whole time I felt like I was being assessed, measured, judged. Like it was some kind of science experiment and Stanley was collecting data. It was unsettling. I made an excuse about needing to leave for another appointment and got out of there as fast as I could. I thought that would be the end of it. But later that night, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Stanley. I have no idea how he got my number. I certainly never gave it to him. He started lecturing me again about health and fitness. Then his tone got really ominous. He said that unhealthy choices have consequences, and that he'd be keeping an eye on me. I hung up and blocked his number immediately, but I still felt shaken. This guy had seemed so normal at first. How did things go so wrong so fast? I deleted my Tinder account that night. The whole experience left me feeling violated and scared. For days afterward, I kept looking over my shoulder, worried I'd see Stanley following me. I was afraid to go to my usual gym in case he showed up there. I even considered reporting him to the police, but I wasn't sure if he'd actually done anything illegal. It was just creepy and threatening. The worst part was how he made me doubt myself. I found myself obsessing over everything I ate, wondering if it was healthy enough. I felt guilty any time I skipped a workout. Stanley's voice was in my head, judging me. It took weeks before I started to feel normal again. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I missed. The way he scanned my body when we first met. How quickly he started giving me advice about my lifestyle. The anger when I didn't take his suggestions seriously. But in the moment, it's not always easy to spot those warning signs. I'm more cautious about online dating now. I always meet people in public places and I trust my gut if something feels off. And I've learned that anyone who tries to control what you eat or how you live your life is bad news, no matter how good their intentions might seem. That Tinder horror story taught me a lot about boundaries and self-respect. I know now that I don't owe anyone an explanation about my lifestyle choices. My health is my business, not some random date's pet project. And anyone who makes me feel bad about myself isn't worth my time. I still use dating apps sometimes, but I'm much pickier about who I meet up with. And I always have an exit strategy planned, just in case. Because you never know when a seemingly normal date might turn into a nightmare. I never thought I'd end up with a Tinder horror story of my own, but here we are. It all started innocently enough when I matched with this guy named Mark. His profile seemed normal, cute pics, witty bio, the usual. We chatted for a few days and he seemed nice, so I agreed to meet up for coffee. The date itself was fine, I guess. Mark looked like his photos and was polite enough. We made small talk about our jobs and hobbies, but the conversation felt a bit forced. There just wasn't much of a spark or connection between us. After about an hour, I made an excuse about needing to get home to do some work. We said a quick goodbye, and that was that, or so I thought. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Mark saying he had a great time and wanted to see me again. I cringed a little, not sure how to respond. I decided honesty was the best policy, so I sent a polite message thanking him for the date, but saying I didn't feel a connection and didn't think we should meet up again. That's when things took a turn. Mark immediately fired back asking why I was playing games and accusing me of leading him on. I was taken aback by his hostile tone. I reiterated that I simply didn't feel a spark, but appreciated him taking the time to meet up. He continued sending aggressive messages, demanding to know exactly what I didn't like about him. I stopped responding at that point, hoping he'd get the hint and leave me alone. But the messages kept coming. He warned me that ghosting is cruel and implied he knew where I lived. That sent a chill down my spine. How could he possibly know my address from one coffee date? I blocked his number, but the damage was already done. I felt scared and violated. Later that day, I got a notification that someone had tried to log into my Instagram account. I immediately changed all my passwords and set my profiles to private. But an hour later, Mark somehow sent me a message saying he understood why I didn't want to see him again. It was followed by several photos of me that he'd somehow accessed from my lockdown social media accounts. My heart started racing as I realized this guy had seriously crossed a line. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? But he hadn't explicitly threatened me. Would they even take it seriously? I felt paralyzed with fear and indecision. I ended up texting my best friend and asking her to come over. Just having another person around made me feel a little safer. We spent the evening going through all my social media and tightening up the privacy settings. I deleted a bunch of old accounts I'd forgotten about. We also went through my phone and laptop, making sure there wasn't any spyware or tracking apps installed. Thankfully, we didn't find anything. The whole process left me feeling violated and exposed. That night, I barely slept. Every little noise had me jumping out of bed, convinced Mark had somehow found my apartment. I kept replaying the coffee date in my head, wondering if I'd missed any red flags. But he'd seemed so normal. How could things have escalated so quickly from one mediocre date? The next few days were a blur of anxiety. I varied my route to work, always looking over my shoulder. I asked my boss if I could work from home for a while, making up an excuse about apartment repairs. I was terrified of running into Mark somewhere in the city. Gradually, the messages and hacking attempts stopped, but the damage was done. I deleted all my dating apps and swore off online dating entirely. Even months later, I still feel on edge sometimes, wondering if he's out there watching me. It's crazy how one bad experience can make you question your safety and privacy in ways you never did before. There were a few moments during that coffee date where Mark said things that made me a little uncomfortable, but I brushed them off. Now I know to pay attention to those instincts. I'm slowly putting myself back out there, but I'm much more cautious now. I always meet dates in public places and share my location with friends. Even someone who seems nice and normal online can turn out to be unstable or even dangerous in real life. I'm not saying everyone on dating apps is a potential stalker, but it pays to be careful and trust your instincts. Take things slow in public, and don't be afraid to shut things down at the first sign of trouble. Your safety is more important than being polite or sparing someone's feelings. I still get a little nervous sometimes when I get a message from an unknown number or see someone who looks like Mark on the street, but I'm trying not to let fear control my life. I'm focusing on spending time with friends and family and rebuilding my sense of security. Someday I might feel ready to try online dating again. But for now, I'm taking things one day at a time and reminding myself that one creep doesn't represent all men. There are good people out there, you just have to be smart and stay safe while looking for them.